Welcome to another installment of Fighting for the Faith. My name is Chris Roseborough. I am your servant in Jesus Christ, and this is the program that compares what people are saying in the name of God to the Word of God. Now, if you've heard the scuttlebutt, apparently there's a big controversy out there. It's brewing, it's shaking, it's rattling, it's rolling, and people are weeping and gnashing teeth all over whether or not Bathsheba is complicit in the affair that she had with David. Yeah, go ahead and hit the subscribe button down below. Don't forget to like the video and ring the bell so you can be notified when we update the channel. Now, what we're going to do here is we're going to navigate between two extremes. And unfortunately, it's got to be done. And if you've ever heard the story of David and Bathsheba preached, you may have heard a pastor or a preacher, I know I have, say that Bathsheba is complicit, that she shouldn't have been bathing out on the roof and stuff like that, and that she did that because she wanted, to get David's attention, the king's attention. Yeah, if you've heard that, the biblical text doesn't say it. Now, conversely, the other end of this is like the whole, stage 4 cancer feminism that basically talks about, sex, always in regards to power and consent and things like this. Yeah, so we're going to note here is that Scripture makes it clear that in this particular case, that, yeah, David definitely abused power, most certainly true, but saying that does not require you to sit there and go, well, therefore we need women pastors. Yeah, we're going to avoid that extreme too. We're going to take the politics straight out of this, and we're going to focus in on what the text says. And when you consider what the text says, nowhere in Scripture is Bathsheba held up as responsible or complicit regarding what went down with her and David. And I know that sounds like crazy talk, but I'll show it to you from the text. So let's get to the text, shall we? And we'll sort this all out. Let's see here. There we go. 2 Samuel chapter 11. And we'll just walk our way through this. We'll apply context. And we're going to pay close attention to the grammar and also the different ways in which people engage in eisegesis, which is reading things into the text that are not there. So 2 Samuel chapter 11 says, in the spring of the year, the time when the kings go out to battle, David sent Joab and his servants with him and all Israel, and they ravaged the Ammonites and besieged Rabbah. But David remained at Jerusalem. All right, so you kind of get the idea. This is the first time. David's getting up there in age. I mean, he's not a spring chicken anymore, and so, you got to pull back on some of your physical things and take care of the aging bones a bit, shall we? So 2 Samuel 11:2 then says this, it happened late one afternoon when David arose from his couch and was walking on the roof of the king's house that he saw from the roof a woman bathing, and the woman was very beautiful. David sent and inquired about the woman, and one said, is not this Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite? So David sent messengers and took her. It's singular. The messengers didn't take her. He took her. Lakach here says that he took her, and she came to him, and he lay with her. Now she had been purifying herself from her uncleanness. Now, a little bit of a note here. We're going to pay attention to what is said regarding Bathsheba because very little is said about her. Number one, we know that she is a very exceedingly beautiful woman. This is in the text. We also know that when she was bathing, it had been for the purposes of purification regarding her uncleanness related to her menstrual cycle. Now, that being said, you're going to note this. Bathsheba is a devout woman. She is observing and keeping the commandments of God of the Mosaic covenant. This is most certainly true. Now, nowhere in here does it say she was bathing on her roof. No, in fact, the Jewish historian Josephus says that she was bathing in her own house when David spied her. If Josephus is correct, that would make David kind of a peeping Tom. He just happened to be at the right place at the wrong time, kind of thing. But regardless, there's nothing here in the text that implies that Bathsheba was intentionally bathing in a place in order to be seen by David. That's not in the text. Instead, you'll note that David's out walking on the roof, just happened to see, whoa, that's a beautiful woman. Who's she? Now, and the other thing is that when it comes to bathing regarding ritual rites, purifying yourself, from uncleanness, sorry, but it doesn't require a woman to completely disrobe. And so the whole mythos that's grown up around this, that somehow she's in part to blame for what comes next, I'm sorry, but the way the text reads, this is a devout woman. She's not looking for anyone else. She's already married. And had David not sent messengers to her, we would have never heard of Bathsheba at all. So when you say she was somehow complicit, no, you're going to know all the blame as the scripture works itself out. All the blame is going to go on David, and all of the verbs regarding his sin are singular masculine verbs, and I'll explain that as we work for it. So again, beautiful woman, but she's devout. She's clearly a believer, and she is keeping the Mosaic covenant. So she had been purifying herself regarding her uncleanness. And again, you'll note David sent messengers. He did that. She couldn't have possibly expected, well, if I clean myself here, and the king sees me, he'll send messengers to inquire about me. No, David saw her. David sent messengers. And the verb here for take, lakach, is singular. He took her. It's not the messengers took her. He took her. She came to him. If Donald Trump were to invite you to the White House, would you go? That's kind of what's going on. So she came to him, and he lay with her. Now, we don't know any of the other details. None. They're not given to us. We don't know if David wined and dined her. We do not know if she resisted and said no. We don't know the circumstances that led up to the two of them having intercourse. But you'll note the text says he lay with her. And nowhere, and again, I'll walk you through this, nowhere is she ever blamed for what took place. This is just how the account goes. So if you're going to fill in the data here from the moment the messengers, arrived with her at the palace and the actual deed itself, we're not given that. Again, the way the text reads, he took her, he lay with her. That's what the text says. So then she returned to her house, and the woman conceived, and she sent and told David, I am pregnant. Now, you could imagine the anxiety that she's going through at this point, because the theocratic kingdom, as ancient Israel was, the penalty for adultery, the penalty for that is death. And so she's rightly worried at this point and sent word to David and said, I am pregnant. Now, note, what happens next, never does it say here that David sent word to Bathsheba what his scheme was. Nope, doesn't say that at all. David gets to work now, working on covering his sin. Because note that although he's the king, he doesn't get special treatment, right? So, I mean, he's in trouble too. I mean, if this got out, imagine what would happen to his reputation. Yeah, he might even, lose his life if found guilty of adultery, because everybody knows it takes two to tangle. And the question is, who's the father? Do you think if she were on trial for having committed adultery because she's pregnant and the child isn't her husband's, do you think for a second, when they say who's the daddy, she's going to go, I'm not going to tell you. So watch what happens next. So David sent word to Joab. Notice it doesn't say he sent word to Bathsheba, because Bathsheba is not a participant in what takes place next. So David sent word to Joab, send me Uriah the Hittite. And Joab sent Uriah to David, and when Uriah came to him, David asked how Joab was doing and how the people were doing and how the war was going. Then David said to Uriah, go down to your house, wash your feet. Uriah went out of the king's house, and there followed him a present from the king. But Uriah slept at the door of the king's house with all the servants of his lord, and did not go down to his house. When they told David Uriah did not go down to his house, David sent to Uriah, have you not come from a journey? Now, a little bit of a note here. Joab is the commander of the army. David is now using official government workers, official government officials, and messengers for the purpose of trying to cover up his sin. So you'll note, this particular case, David's definitely using power here to cover up what happened, what went down. Again, nothing here about Bathsheba participating in this or even knowing about it. So Uriah said to David, the ark in Israel and Judah, they dwell in booths, and my lord Joab and the servants of my lord are camping in the open field. Shall I then go to my house and eat and drink and lie with my wife? As you live and as your soul lives, I will not do this thing. So then David said to Uriah, remain here tomorrow also, and today also, and tomorrow I'll send you back. So Uriah remained in Jerusalem that day and the next. And then David invited him, and he ate in his presence and he drank, so that he made him drunk. Wow. So at this point, David is really, I mean, so it's not apparently below him to engage in some purposeful whining and dining for the purpose of making somebody mentally unstable, inebriated. You see what I'm saying here? I mean, if he had done this to Bathsheba, that would have been the equivalent of the ancient world's version of a date rape. Rather than slipping her a roofie, just keep filling the cup up and saying, "Drink up, dear." But the text doesn't say he does that. But I'm just saying, had he done that to Bathsheba, that's what that would have been. So so he drank and made him drunk. And again, note who's responsible for Uriah getting drunk. David is. And in the evening, he went out to lie on his couch with the servants of his lord, but he did not go down to his house. So in the morning, David wrote a letter to Joab. So this is an official governmental correspondence from the office of the king, the monarch of Israel, to the head of the army. Again, all government agencies. And you're going to note here that David is using the trappings of power, the things available to somebody who wields a lot of power, for the purpose now of having Uriah the Hittite murdered. And the sick thing here is that Uriah is going to be carrying his own death warrant with him the whole time and not even know it. I mean, that's how crazy sick this is. So in the morning, David wrote a letter to Joab, sent it by the hand of Uriah. In the letter, he wrote, "Set Uriah in the forefront of the hardest fighting, and then draw back from him, that he may be struck down and die." And as Joab was besieging the city, he assigned Uriah to the place where he knew there were valiant men. And the men of the city came out and fought with Joab. Some of the servants of David among the people fell. Uriah the Hittite also died. Then Joab sent and told David all the news about the fighting, and he instructed the messenger, when you have finished telling all the news about the fighting to the king, then if the king's anger rises, and if he says to you, why did you go so near to the city to fight? Do you not know that they would shoot from the wall? Who killed Abimelech, the son of Jerubbesheth? Did not a woman cast an upper millstone on him from the wall so that he died at Thebez? Why did you go so near the wall? Then you shall say, your servant Uriah the Hittite is dead also. So note here, co-conspirator in the misuse of government for the purpose of covering a crime. And yeah, adultery is a crime in ancient Israel. The co-conspirator is Joab. Murder's crime too. So Bathsheba, though, not co-conspirator at all. And watch what happens next. You'll see this as the text unfolds. So the messenger came and told David all that Joab had sent him to tell. And the messenger said to David, the men gained an advantage over us, came out against us in the field, but we drove them back to the entrance of the gate. Then the archers shot at your servant from the wall. Some of the king's servants are dead, and your servant Uriah the Hittite is dead also. So David said to the messenger, thus shall you say to Joab, do not let this matter displease you, for the sword devours now one and now another. And so you'll note here, official correspondence goes back. This is a perfect way of creating a paper trail. Oh, don't let this matter displease you, Joab. And now he's got a paper trail. Plausible deniability here. I mean, he is utterly misusing government officials, people in offices, his own office, for the purpose of covering not one crime now, but two. So strengthen your attack against the city, overthrow it, and encourage him. So when the wife of Uriah heard that her husband was dead, she lamented over her husband. So what do we know about Bathsheba? She's a beautiful woman, very beautiful. She's devout. She's religious. She also, upon hearing about the death of her husband, she didn't sit there and go, yay, now I can move in with David. Nope. The text says she lamented over her husband. And so our Hebrew verb for lament here, I think, will help us out. Safad, to wail, lament, especially for the dead. You know, so the idea of wailing over calamity, over a judgment, to be bewailed. This is the concept here. So when she finds out her husband's dead, she just loses it. These are not the actions of a woman who secretly harbored desires to be one of the queens of Israel. Like I said, beautiful woman, religious woman. And she lamented her husband. So put yourself in her shoes for a second. Now, she gets a knock on a door from messengers, from David, asking her to come to the palace. Whatever transpired at the palace, she leaves having been, well, can we call this what it is? Sexually assaulted? Yeah. She leaves having had sexual intercourse with the king, which is not what she intended to go there for. And it resulted in her becoming pregnant. She is now pregnant with the king's child. And now her husband, she hears, has died in war. And she bitterly laments the death of her husband. These are not actions consistent with a woman who secretly harbored a desire, to have an adulterous tryst, an affair with the king. And so now what happens is, when the mourning was over, David sent and brought her to his house, and she became his wife and bore him a son. Now, people, will argue, well, why would she do that if David actually sexually assaulted her? What other choices does the woman have? in a theocratic patriarchy, she still risks people saying, "Wait a second, how can that be Uriah's child when he's been gone for so many months?" And and they can do the math. That's part of it. But number two, as a widower and a single mom, what is she gonna do here, right? So you'll note David worked this whole thing out. He worked this whole thing. She has no idea that David is the one who maneuvered it so that her husband would be murdered by the hand of the Ammonites. And here's the most interesting part about all of this is that when you kind of work the details out, David looks like he's doing kind of an act of charity. Here's this poor woman who's a widowed. She's widowed because of her husband who died in war, and so what does the king do? Oh, in mercy, and he goes ahead and marries her so that she will not be destitute. I mean, if you think about it, there's a real good chance that this really makes David look like such a great guy. But note here the last sentence. But the thing that David did, the thing that David had done, displeased Yahweh. It doesn't say the thing that David and Bathsheba had done together, but the thing that David had done displeased the Lord. Who's getting all the blame from God? And by the way, God knows all the details. All right? You think for a second, if Bathsheba had some blame in this, do you think for a second that the text would read, but the thing that David and Bathsheba had done together, this displeased the Lord? No, because again, the text makes it clear. Bathsheba, very beautiful, devout, observant, commandment-keeping woman who loved her husband and lamented her death. Who's the one responsible for all of this? David. And so when you say that Bathsheba, she clearly wanted this man, you know what you're doing? You're victim blaming. And that is just sick and perverse. Let me give you an example of victim blaming that I also consider to be quite disturbing. We're heading to the Parliament of New South Wales. We're going to be listening to a member of the Green Party from a few weeks back on the floor of the Parliament in New South Wales, Australia, talk about Brian Houston and how he operated and the things that he did in relation to his father, Frank Houston's pedophilia. And I want you to hear what this member of the New South Wales Parliament, Green Party guy too. Yeah, I can't say I really like his politics, but listen to what he had to say.
On the 23rd of October last year, I spoke in this place about the repeated sexual abuse of a boy by Frank Houston in Sydney in the 1970s. On that occasion, I referred to this boy as AHA, as he was referred to in the Royal Commission. That boy is now a man called Brett Sengstock, a man who broke his silence to call publicly for justice, a brave man who deserves justice. The man who sexually assaulted Brett was Frank Houston, often known...
All right, so David Shoebridge here, a Green Party guy, New South Wales Parliament, is recounting some of the details as it relates to Frank Houston and his sexual abuse of Brett. And again, just listen to as he kind of unfolds this, and you'll kind of see the point as to why I'm playing this here.
The father of Hillsong, a serial pedophile. His son, Brian Houston, is the current leader of the Hillsong Church and best friend of Prime Minister Scott Morrison. Our Prime Minister is so enamoured of Brian Houston that he asked for him to be part of Australia's delegation to the USA, only to be refused by the Trump administration. Brian Houston and Hillsong's response to the Royal Commission's damning findings regarding the church included the following. This Royal Commission did not directly involve Hillsong Church. The abuse committed by the late Frank Houston, the father of our senior pastor Brian Houston, occurred many years before Hillsong Church existed, when he was a credentialed Assemblies of God minister in New Zealand, end of quote. This was also their legal defence against the claims from Brett Sengstock for compensation.
Yeah, you'll note that he's reading out testimony from the Royal Commission appearance of Brian Houston and others. This is back, 4 or 5 years ago.
So-called love offerings for visiting pastors can raise hundreds of thousands of dollars each Sunday, avoided paying fair compensation to Brett on a legal technicality. These love offerings are part of what make this brand of Pentecostalism so lucrative. While a pastor cannot take money from their own church, they can visit a neighbouring church and receive direct love offerings in cash or by cheque. This money will often be funneled to a public benevolent institution that the pastor has registered in his or her name. This then pays them a handsome tax-free wage and fringe benefits. In short, these love offerings are a con. Hillsong did eventually give some money to Brett for his damaged life and repeated assaults. He was promised a mere $10,000 hush payment at Thornley McDonald's by Frank Houston and Nabi Salah. Even that cash was only forthcoming after a call with Brian Houston.
Now, listen carefully to what Brian Houston said to Brian Houston's father's victim. Okay?
Brett's testimony to the Royal Commission about this is illuminating. He said this: "About 2 months after my meeting with Pastor Frank at McDonald's, I telephoned Brian Houston as I had not yet received any money from Pastor Frank. We had a conversation to the following effect. Me: what's happening with the payment I was promised? I agreed to forgive your father. Brian: yes, okay, I'll get the money to you. There's no problem. You know, it's your fault all of this happened. You tempted my father." When Brett finally...
Yeah, that's right. Brian Houston said to one of his father's victims, and Frank Houston was a serial pedophile, "This is your fault. You tempted my father." And I'll be blunt. When people try to pin part of the blame for the whole thing that went down with Bathsheba and Uriah the Hittite and King David and pin it on Bathsheba, number one, there's no biblical text that even says that. And David does get all the blame from God. But what you're effectively doing is the same thing that Brian Houston did to one of his father's victims. Blame the victim. Bathsheba wasn't looking for an affair with David. She wasn't strategically positioning herself in order to seduce him. She is not blamed regarding him lying with her. In fact, all of the blame, exactly all of it, not some of it, all of it is placed on King David himself. And we'll see that as the story unfolds. So when you're going to sit there and say, "Oh man, Bathsheba, she was asking for it, man. She shouldn't have been bathing in a place where the king should have seen, could have seen her." Yeah, do you understand how much that sounds like, when somebody is on, when somebody's filed charges against a fellow for rape, and the defense is, and people go along with it, well, she shouldn't have been wearing that outfit. It tempted him to. She was basically, by wearing what she was wearing, she was tempting him, and so she got what was coming. This is sick. This is absolutely sick. There's no place for this in the Christian church. No place whatsoever, because the biblical text is clear. David is the one responsible. So we continue then, 2 Samuel 12. "So Yahweh sent Nathan to David." Notice, Nathan's not there on his own recognizance. He's not there thinking, I've kind of put 2 and 2 together here and something ain't right. No, the Lord himself, the God of the universe, contacts Nathan the prophet and says, "This is what went down. Here's what I want you to do." And you're going to note that Nathan is acting via a direct communication from God himself. And in that communication, God doesn't give any orders whatsoever to Nathan to name Bathsheba as complicit in what happened, or that some of the blame falls on her. Far from it. Watch this. "So Yahweh sent Nathan to David, and he came to him and said to him, 'There were 2 men in a certain city.'" See if you can figure out, by the way, which character in this parable that Nathan tells Bathsheba is. Okay? "There were 2 men in a certain city, one rich, the other poor. The rich man had very many flocks and herds. Kind of like, David had quite a few wives, by the way, more than one, more than two, more than three. Yeah, anyway, you get it's getting up there, right? And so, but the poor man, he had nothing but one little ewe lamb. Oh. So, which he had bought, and he brought it up, and it grew up with him and with his children. It used to eat it as his morsel, drink from his cup, lie in his arms. It was like a daughter to him. Now there came a traveler to the rich man, and he was unwilling to take one of his own flock or herd to prepare for the guest who had come to him. So he took the poor man's lamb. Note the phrase. He took the poor man's lamb, prepared it for the man who had come. And then David's anger was greatly kindled against the man. He said to Nathan, as Yahweh lives, the man who has done this deserves to die, and he shall restore the lamb fourfold because he did this thing and because he had no pity. And now the trap springs. Nathan said, you are the man. Thus says Yahweh, the God of Israel. I anointed you king over Israel. I delivered you out of the hand of Saul. I gave you your master's house and your master's wives into your arms, and gave you the house of Israel and of Judah. And if that were too little, I would add to you as much more. And now it comes. Why have you despised the word of Yahweh? And you're going to note here the question, why have you despised? It doesn't say, why have you and Bathsheba despised the word of Yahweh? In fact, you despised is bazita in the Hebrew, and this is a masculine singular verb. Second person masculine singular verb. Not you two, but you, singular. Not you and Bathsheba, but you, David, alone. Why have you despised the word of Yahweh to do what was evil in his sight? You have struck down Uriah the Hittite with the sword, and you have taken his wife to be your wife, and have killed him with the sword of the Ammonites. Now, therefore, so you'll note here, by the way, the sheep, the ewe lamb, because David took Bathsheba, he took her. The ewe lamb there that was slaughtered and devoured was Bathsheba. Yeah, you'll note that even in the parable that Nathan tells then, the lamb did nothing. It wasn't complicit in its being devoured. Just pointing it out because that's how that parable works. So you have struck down Uriah the Hittite with a sword. You've taken his wife to be your wife. You killed him with the sword. Now, therefore, the sword shall never depart from your house, because you have despised me. And again, here we go again with the bazah here. And this particular verb, second person masculine singular, not the two of you, in your adulterous affair, your love affair with each other. No. You, singular, David, you have despised me, and you have taken the wife of Uriah the Hittite to be your wife. Thus says Yahweh, behold, I will raise up evil against you out of your own house, and I will take your wives before your eyes and give them to your neighbor, and he shall lie with your wives in the sight of this sun. For you did it secretly. Note here that what David did to Bathsheba, he did secretly. Yeah. And note here, you did it secretly. Another second person masculine singular verb. Asita. You did it secretly. You, not the two of you. If it was the two of you did it secretly, totally different verb. But you, singular, did it secretly. I'll do this thing before all of Israel, before the sun. So David said to Nathan, I have sinned against Yahweh. No mention of Bathsheba. Who takes full responsibility for this? David. And he doesn't say something like, well, I better talk to, we're going to have to talk to Bathsheba because, she really was part of this too. This was our scheme together. No, David confesses, I have sinned against Yahweh. So Nathan said to David, Yahweh also has put away your sin. You shall not die. So he receives an absolution. God forgives him. Nevertheless, because by this deed you have utterly scorned, and here's another fun Hebrew word, na'atz, you have scorned. Again, in this particular construction, na'atz, na'atza. This is, again, second person masculine singular. Because you have scorned, not the two of you, because you have scorned Yahweh. The child who is to be born to you shall die. Now, the reason why the child's going to die is because David, he scorned Yahweh. Then Nathan went to his house. And so the Lord afflicted the child that Uriah's wife bore to David. And you're going to note here, this is kind of a consistent thing. You can see this in the Gospel of Matthew, that Scripture often after this will refer to her in the sense, not often, that's but it does from time to time refer to her as Uriah's wife. Interesting. So the Lord afflicted the child that Uriah's wife bore to David, and he became sick. So you get the idea here. So when you read out the text, when somebody says, oh, she was on the roof and she wanted to be seen and she had it in mind to have this affair, the text doesn't say that. Now, it is also true, David most certainly used his office as the king, used government officials, and even had a co-conspirator, the commander of the army, Joab, participate in the cover-up. This is most certainly true. That does not mean, by the way, therefore, we need women pastors. No, it's just in this particular case, the idea is that David is the one responsible. All the blame falls on him. And again, what does the text reveal about Bathsheba? Very beautiful, religiously devout. She loved her husband and lamented his death. And so when you read beyond this and somehow in order to try to cast blame on Bathsheba, and many people are doing that today in order to basically not try to give any ground to the Me Too movement and their toxic stage 4 cancer feminism. I totally get that, but you're not being honest when you do that. Because what we're dealing with here this is David's sin, not Bathsheba's. She wasn't looking for this. She didn't want it, but it came to her. And when you place blame on her, I'm sorry, not even God did that at the time. And when he sent Nathan didn't confront the two of them. Nathan confronted David. Just him. So you keep that in mind. Now, no, there are other instances when it comes to sexual assault and things like that, or you could talk about different ways in which the Scripture describes these things. It's true that there are women who initiate. This is most certainly true. There are men who initiate. I think of the story of Joseph and Potiphar. Let me see if I can find this here. Potiphar, yeah, that's right. So we want Potiphar, and let's see. Genesis 39, I think, is what I need here. Interesting story. You'll note that workplace sexual harassment, first time it's mentioned in Scripture, which is kind of a funny way of talking about it, was actually initiated, by a woman. So here's what it says regarding Joseph. Joseph was handsome in form and appearance. He's a slave now in Egypt, sold to Potiphar. And after a time, his master's wife cast her eyes on Joseph and said, lie with me. So we got workplace sexual harassment, and who's doing the sexual harassing? A woman. You see, sexual harassment goes both ways. Sexual assault goes both ways. It can be initiated by a man. It can be initiated by a woman. It could be initiated by a man in a powerful position. It could be initiated by a man in a low position. It could be initiated by a woman in a high position. It could be initiated by a woman in a low position. Adultery and sexual immorality is an equal opportunity sin. Okay, so she says to Joseph, lie with me, but he refused and said to his master's wife, behold, because of me and my master has no concern about anything in the house, and he's put everything that he has in my charge. He is not greater in this house than I am, nor has he kept back anything from me except you, because you are his wife. How then can I do such great wickedness and sin against God? And as she spoke to Joseph day after day, note, this harassment went on for a long time. He would not listen to her, to lie beside her, or even to be with her. But one day, yeah, that's right, one day. So you can see what's going on here. One day when he went into the house to do his work, and none of the men of the house was there in the house, she caught him by his garment, saying, lie with me. But he left his garment in her hand and fled and got out of the house. And as soon as she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and had fled out of the house, she called to the men of the household and said to them, see, he's brought among us a Hebrew to laugh at us. And he came to lie with me, but I cried out with a loud voice. And as soon as he heard that I lifted up my voice and cried out, he left his garment here beside me and fled and got out of the house. Yeah, in this particular case, Joseph ends up going to prison for 13 years, thanks to this woman. And so you'll note, sexual sin, like I said, is an equal opportunity thing. And so, number one, when you read the story of David and Bathsheba, and you pay attention to the context and to the verbs and to how this whole thing goes down, there's only one person whom God blames for that, and it's David, not Bathsheba. And there is no evidence in the text that she was complicit or conspired with him or any of those things. Nope. In fact, the way the story reads, you have a very beautiful, religiously devout woman who loves her husband, who receives a summons to come see the king and had no idea what that summons was about. But the whole thing was a scheme, a pretense, because David didn't check his passions, and as a result of it, he violated her. He's responsible. The text says he's the one. And he's the one who scorned the word of the Lord. So, that being the case, you go way beyond the biblical text, and you're eisegeting when you blame Bathsheba. She did nothing wrong. Nothing. As for, the SJW, stage 4 cancer feminists and their whole idea and their ideas, you can't support that either. Okay? But the idea here is that when you just let the text tell you what's going on, then you need to understand that, people say, well, if you say that David's to blame, then you're giving credence to the stage 4 cancer feminists and their Me Too ideology. And so it's either one or the other. No, it's not. That's called the either or fallacy, which is a logical fallacy. It's not either or. Oftentimes truth is its own side. And so the job of a Christian is to properly exegete the text and stay within its bounds, and to not slander human beings. Note here, I'm going to point this out here. When you say that Bathsheba, she was looking for it, man. She had it coming. Because she was intentionally trying to seduce the king and stuff like that. You're slandering her, straight out. And I would note this, that out of all of David's wives, there was only one who was given the honor by God to bear the son of David who would be in the line of the Messiah. And that person is listed for us in the Gospel of Matthew. Gospel of Matthew, chapter 1. And here's what it says. Matthew 1, verse 2. Abraham was the father of Isaac, Isaac the father of Jacob, Jacob the father of Judah and his brothers, Judah the father of Perez, Zerah by Tamar, and Perez the father of Hezron, and Hezron the father of Ram, and Ram the father of Abinadab, and Abinadab the father of Nahshon, Nahshon the father of Salmon, Salmon the father of Boaz, by Rechab, and Boaz the father of Obed by Ruth, and Obed the father of Jesse, Jesse the father of David the king, and David was the father of Solomon by the wife of Uriah. So note this, that God honored her. She's even mentioned as the wife of her husband, the one she lamented and loved, Uriah, in the genealogies of Jesus. So I would recommend you stop victim blaming and stop trying to change what the biblical text says and create this schema where you can find some way to find fault with Bathsheba in order to protect Christianity from the assaults of stage 4 cancerous feminism and the eccentricities and extremisms of the Me Too movement. You don't need to do that. The text doesn't allow you to do that. The truth is its own side. The stage 4 cancerous feminists, they're false, they're wrong, and their ideology is just sickening. And you don't concede any ground to them at all, nor does it require you to be woke to say, nope, the scripture says David is to blame, not Bathsheba. And when you read the story, never once, nowhere in scripture is she ever implicated by God at all, or shown to have guilt in this regard. So keep that in mind. Stick to what the text says, and you will do well to argue against error with real truth. Because when you change the story and you eisegete in Bathsheba's guilt, I'm sorry, but what you're doing is you're discrediting yourself and giving credibility to the stage 4 feminists, the stage 4 cancerous feminists out there and the extremists in the Me Too movement. And you're driving people away from biblical Christianity towards them because everybody can see you're pulling you're speaking lies and you're not telling the truth, and it's not what the text says. So that would be my recommendation. Hopefully you found this helpful. If so, all the information on how you can share the video is down below in the description. And of course, we can't do what we're doing without your financial support. So if you find our ministry to you helpful in opening your eyes to properly understand the Word of God, in order to not be deceived and to really understand what the Scriptures say, consider supporting. More than consider, actually do support us, because we cannot do what we are doing without your support. So until next time, may God richly bless you in the grace and mercy won by Jesus Christ and his vicarious death on the cross for all of your sins. Amen.